It's time for the Red Zone Warriors Fantasy Football Show with Rob the Commish Smith, Jim the Jimmer Kiernan, and Jay Cushman Corson. Let's talk some fantasy football, boys.
We're going to start with the quarterbacks and hit several of these guys kind of in the mid-tiers. And I'm going to start with Nick Foles. He's kind of controversial this year. You know, his ADP right now at Fantasy Football Calculator is quarterback 6 off the board, going at the 603. You know, I've got him at 9th, and I'll kind of explain, you know, why that is. I'm going to back up just a little bit because a lot of people don't necessarily know a whole lot about Nick Foles except, you know, what he did kind of the last half of the season last year. But he was a third-round draft pick by the Eagles in 2012 after playing for University of Arizona. So he's actually going into his third year this year in 2014. Didn't do squat his rookie season. You know, he came in, he filled in for a hurt Michael Vick, and he just lit it up, and that is why his ADP is 6 currently. So do we believe that? Do we feel he can keep these numbers up? Is he worth a 6 QB off the board? Is he worth someone picking up in the 6th round? So let's just kind of review his numbers from last year. You know, he started 10 games. Again, that's because Michael Vick got hurt. And in those 10 games, he had just under 3,000 passing yards. He had 27 passing touchdowns. He had 57 rushing attempts for 220 yards, so the guy can run when he needs to. And that was about 3.9 yards attempt, which was about twice what Trent Richardson put up, as Jimmer pointed out earlier in the news and notes.
Too soon.
And he also put up 3 rushing touchdowns. So that definitely helped his fantasy value. In week 9 of last year, he became the second NFL quarterback to post a perfect passing rating of 158.3 while passing for more than 400 yards. And he was the first NFL quarterback to post a perfect passing rating, throwing 7 touchdowns in a single game. I mean, that was just unbelievable. It was almost too good to be true, but it did actually happen. I watched that game. It was pretty amazing. So he also holds the best TD to interception ratio ever. Granted, he just played those 10 games, but that's a 27 touchdown to 2 interception ratio, which was amazing. He did lead the Eagles to their first division title in 3 years, and again, that was as a sophomore, and again, that was having not played at all his rookie season nor the first 6 games of last year. So that was pretty significant. Very impressive numbers. He had an NFL best 9.12 yards per attempt. Again, you know, of course, he had Deshaun Jackson last year, which he won't have this year. And he had a high 64% completion rate, which was 6th in the NFL. You know, that's higher than quarterbacks like Peyton Manning and such that were second, you know, below him. So he had all that to say, he had an incredible season last year in the 10 games that he did play. The Eagles felt confident with him moving forward that not only did they get rid of Michael Vick, they did nothing in free agency from a quarterback perspective that would suggest that Nick Foles will not be the clear #1 starter. I mean, that was huge to me. I was really wondering if they would do something in the draft. They did not. That cements him in my mind as their #1 starter. I think that's just a foregone conclusion that that's going to happen. You know, Chip Kelly, as we know, runs a fast, up-tempo offense. It's very productive. They get a ton of plays off. The more plays that you get off, the more chances that these offensive players have for making points for our fantasy teams. You know, he does still have a plethora of offensive weapons there, including, oh, by the way, the rushing leader of 2013, one Mr. LaShawn McCoy. So although, you know, under no circumstances do I think he can maintain that incredible TD to interception ratio that he had. I think the indicators that he did prove to us with all those records that I just mentioned proves that his success will be able to continue. My main concern for Nick Foles and why I have him 9th, which is below the ADP, is because I think they're going to be, you know, they lost Deshaun Jackson. He was definitely the downfield threat. And I think there's a lot of pressure this year on Jeremy Maclin. He just had a scare in OTAs with his knee, but everything's fine. No issues there to worry about. But if Jeremy Maclin goes down, there's not a whole lot of guys behind him. He's got Riley Cooper and rookies essentially behind him. So, obviously LaShawn McCoy is there, Darren Sproles is there, but from a sheer passing perspective, my concern with Nick Foles is he can't maintain that ratio. He won't be as efficient, and if Maclin goes down, he might be in trouble with putting up numbers. So I've got him at solid at number 9. I think he's probably a guy that you could definitely stream, no doubt about it. And if you want to risk him as your QB1, I really couldn't argue with that. So at the end of the day, I see him with about 3,900 passing yards, playing a full 16 games. I see him with just under 30 touchdowns. Interceptions, of course, will go up. I've got him at 9 interceptions, 250 rushing yards, and about 2 rushing TDs, putting him at number 9 in a QB ranking for 2014.
Yeah, Nick Foles, I've also got him a little lower than what his ADP is. I've got him at 10th. He's not a guy I'm going to be targeting just because I don't think he can keep up the production he had last year. I think him losing Deshaun Jackson hurts him a lot, just as much I think as it helps RG3. Jim, I know you're a Chip Kelly fan, so let's hear the gospel.
Oh, okay, all right. First of all, the whole Deshaun Jackson. Let me debunk that theory for you right now. Deshaun Jackson had 200-yard games, all right, during the Nick Foles era. Are you kidding me? He didn't even like the guy. He didn't even throw it to him. So, okay, that goes way out the window. In their passing scheme and in their offense, their spread option offense, which is actually kind of oriented towards passing, it actually goes in favor to shorter passes, okay? Let me reiterate that. It goes towards shorter passes. So that means that, hey, Deshaun Jackson's not going to miss him. Jerry Maclin, he is more of a slot kind of guy. He's quick, and he's going to catch a shit ton of passes this year. But those wide receivers, and by the way, you're way off in his rushing yards. I mean, the dude easily can rush for 500 yards, being as white and as gangly as he is. I mean, those are accidental yards, quite frankly. And by the way, the TDs, that's one of the biggest and easiest things for Chip Kelly to do to exploit in the defense is having the naked bootleg for a quarterback off a fake option. So just saying he's going to get more rushing touchdowns, he's going to get more rushing yards than you think. Passing yards are probably accurate, and yes, I totally agree. He probably can keep that same consistency level that he had last year because that was unreal, quite frankly.
Well, so Jimmer's clearly high on Nick Foles. He has him at number 6 overall. The fact that he's white, I don't think has any implication on his rushing yards except for the fact that they may go down. I mean, Steve Young was probably, the last guy who could rush for anything more than 250 yards on the field from a white boy perspective. But, I don't know. The guy, he kind of came out of nowhere. Well, he did come out of nowhere, frankly, and he only played 10 games. It wasn't a new offense. I do feel comfortable with him. I still have him in the top 10. But it's just one of those guys for me that I just don't feel, if I draft him, if he falls and falls and falls, I get him in the 8th round. And, I might feel pretty good about that. Might I back him up with somebody else like the Red Rocket, Andy Dalton, or somebody? I might feel I need to. But if he produces even, with a 25% deduction from what he did last year, he would definitely maintain what you need from a fantasy perspective and quarterback points. So we're going to go ahead and move along from one Mr. Nick Foles to a guy, RG3. RG3, he is all over the place. People do not know what to think of him. They don't know what to expect from him from coming from one of the best rookie seasons we've ever seen since Cam Newton to completely shitting the bed last year for very valid reasons to being 100% and what could he possibly do. I know that the Cushman and I are very high on him. We have him both at 6. And Jimmer is ridiculously having him at the 15th overall quarterback position, which is embarrassing for me to actually say out loud on the air, quite frankly. So before we let the Jimmer defend himself and his ridiculous ranking of RG3, Jay, what do we have to say about RG3 moving into 2014?
Well, he's not going to be 15th, I know that. I have him 6th overall. The first thing we need to say about RG3 is the fact that Deshaun Jackson's rival in Washington
Well, it's good news for a lot of the guys there. I think it's the best news for RG3. You know, like Jim said, the guy's not the greatest receiver in the world, but he does stretch defenses with his speed, the deep threat. So, you know, between Jackson and Pierre Garçon, I think the Redskins suddenly have one of the more dynamic receiving duels in the league. You throw in Jordan Reed and Jay Gruden taking over as the main man on the offense, and I think it really puts Griffin into the starting fantasy quarterback conversation. Gruden's known for running a version of the West Coast offense. It calls for quick passing decisions, you know, a few deep shots thrown in there. So I think that helps with RG3 not throwing interceptions too much. You know, Gruden loves to throw the ball. He ordered well over 1,500 passing attempts, including 516 per season in Cincinnati. So between Griffin having a nice solid run up down there in Washington, D.C., I doubt Gruden's really going to be shy about letting Griffin chuck the ball down the field. So my projection for RG3 is 3,800 passing yards, 450 rushing yards, 31 total touchdowns. I think he stands out as a quarterback with 300-point-plus potential in fantasy. So I think it definitely puts him in close to the top 5 in passers this year for sure.
Jimmer, before you respond to this, let me just say, from someone who hates Phillip Rivers and someone who believes that Phillip Rivers has these on and off again years like we've never seen in NFL history, last year was clearly an on year. You have Phillip Rivers ranked as 10, and you have RG3 ranked as 15. So please explain that in your explanation as to why RG3 is 15th in your rankings.
Absolutely. Well, let me start with RG3. His offensive line is the problem, all right? I have no doubt about his skill, his arm, his accuracy. He's actually a very accurate quarterback. Problem is he makes just stupid moves with his legs, all right? That's how he gets hurt, is when he's rushing the ball. And quite frankly, his offensive line cannot protect him. So, yes, by all means, you guys can have him. He has all the skill sets to be a top 10 quarterback, but unfortunately he doesn't have the team to be a top 10 quarterback, all right? That's the big difference there. So that's why I'm very negative on him, because honestly that offensive line is just shit. They literally asked me to start for him at one point. All right, and as far as Phillip Rivers goes, dude, that guy has more ups and downs than a roller coaster at Disneyland, all right? He's terrible, okay? But he also has a couple little new toys to play with over there, and he actually has a decent offensive line, which I will continue to say is a big effing deal.
I see. Well, I'm actually looking up the Redskins' offensive line rankings last year as we speak, and I'm clearly stalling in order to do that. And dude, not to throw you under the bus, bro, but according to fantasy or football, Pro Football Focus, Washington Redskins were ranked 5th last year in offensive line. So
yeah,
maybe
last year. What did they do this year?
Well, we don't know because they haven't started yet, but we'll see.
No. What did they do this year?
That
is not the same squad, and that's why I'm saying that.
Okay. Well, then that could very well be. This is my thing on RG3. I'm also very high on this guy. This is RG3. He came out in the rookie season. He finished 5th as a rookie, which was probably, I don't remember what Cam Newton did as a rookie, but he was probably top 5 as well. It was great. He's coming off a full season, which he did not have going into his sophomore year. He hurt his ACL. He had to sit out of OTAs. He had to basically sit out of training camp and just ride a bike on the sidelines. He wasn't allowed to have that chemistry with his wide receivers and so forth. That was not this year. He's going in 100% healthy, not going to be having to do the knee brace. He's going to have all this time with his offensive weapons to get that chemistry down. They've added weapons. They added DeSean Jackson, as we talked about. Jordan Reed is at least healthy for game 1. That's the most we can say about Jordan Reed at this point, but he is. The running game will probably be better because of DeSean Jackson. Alfred Morris is obviously a good running back and what he needs to do. I just think the guy, especially being able to get him at the 7-1, which is where he's going right now in 12-man leagues, is an incredible value. The guy can still get it done with his legs. I think this is a guy that I absolutely would target and I recommend our listeners to target this guy in the 7th through 10th round, and I really, really, really do not think he is going to let anyone down in 2014.
Absolutely. RG3.
RG3 president. All right, so we're going to get off our RG3 bandwagon, and we are going to move to another guy that had an off year last year to no fault of his own, and this is one Mr. Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan is going currently 9th in ADP, 9th quarterback off the board, kind of towards the latter end of the 7th round. So, Jimmer, what do you think about Matt Ryan? Obviously, he lost some weapons last year. Julio Jones went out early. He had some injuries he was dealing with. He still had Tony Gonzalez and so forth, but he lost him. So what do we think about him moving in 2014? And is this a guy that you feel comfortable drafting at the latter part of the 7th round like ADP suggests?
Yeah, I think he's one of those guys, if he falls into your lap and you haven't picked up a quarterback yet because you didn't get one of the big three, I think he's an absolute steal. I think last year the Atlanta Falcons just sucked. Let's be honest. I can't fully blame Matt Ryan, Matty Ice for that, but I think Tony Gonzalez said it best, and Tony Gonzalez said, hey, he's not elite, all right, but he's very close. He's right on that cusp. He definitely needs guys around him to elevate his overall game, which is something you got to kind of think about. Like, wait a second, so if you have all the tools, he can make all the right calls, all right? So statistically, I mean, yeah, last year he was down in everything, across the board. But let's look at why. I mean, Julio Jones was gone. Roddy White was hurt for a while, which Roddy White never actually gets hurt. Steven Jackson, by the way, you kind of brought him in, paid him a lot of money to basically perform, and he didn't, which is something you should come to expect from Oregon State. They just don't perform. And so anyway, my point is that he's got all those things back now. All right, so he's honestly, with all those tools and talents coming back, I got to believe that his fantasy value will go up. However, there's a couple new guys that came into the fold. Andrew Luck, I think, is right there on that cusp of elite. Andy Dalton, honestly, we'll get into him later, but he had a fluke of a year, and he was so good. But a couple of those other guys kind of jumped him, quite frankly, and I think Atlanta just tied themselves to him perhaps a little bit too soon. But he is, without a doubt, in my mind, he's a top 10 guy. And so I think, yeah, he's right around that 4,500 yards category. I think he'll pass for over 30 TDs. Obviously, he doesn't do much rushing, so I wouldn't worry about that. But he is consistently able to get you for that 12-man league. He's definitely draftable. In fact, it would be stupid for someone not to draft him. And more importantly, I think in that 7th round, you're not really taking a risk. You just know what you're going to get. So with that, I'll turn it over to you guys and let you guys harp on me all you want, haters.
No, actually, I agree with you. I have Matt Ryan one spot lower than you in 9th, but I think the guy's got the talent, and I think he's got the weapons. As long as Julio stays healthy, Roddy stays on the field, this guy is going to be throwing the ball around like crazy. Hopefully Steven Jackson can give us something better than he did last year. I mean, I loved this guy when he was in St. Louis, yeah, and he would run people over. I remember watching him play the Lions and just being like, oh, man, this guy's just killing us. And last year he was just awful. I don't know what his deal was. But so, yeah, I would definitely take Matt Ryan in the late 7th round. Hopefully he drops a little bit and you can get him in the 8th. But 7th round is definitely a draftable spot for this guy.
Well, and Jay, let me just mention too. I mean, a lot of people I've listened to and read about. I mean, they're all in on Matt Ryan again, and the reason is this. I mean, Matt Ryan, 2010 he finished 8th in quarterback rankings. 2011 he finished 8th in quarterback rankings. 2012 he finished 7th. I mean, the guy's been consistently, except for last year when he had all these injuries he had to deal with, he's been a consistent top 7, top 8 guy. So he's a guy that you can pick in later rounds, that you can rely on. You don't have to stream him with other guys. He's not being drafted till the 9th, at least at this point, an ADP somewhere in the 7th round. So he's safe. Everybody's coming back who's healthy. Yes, they lost Tony Gonzalez. There's the question mark there at tight end. But Julio Jones is a lot better than Tony Gonzalez, at least as a down-the-field threat, as good as Tony Gonzalez was. And Hall of Fame and all that stuff. That's just a fact. I am a little concerned with their running game. Steven Jackson is getting older and older, and not sure how I feel about him as a running back going in this year. He seemed to, he's hurt quite a bit, so I'm a little concerned on the running back thing. But as far as just Matty Ice throwing the ball, I think he's a safe pick. And if I can't get my beloved RG3, I will definitely settle for Matt Ryan and feel pretty comfortable doing so.
Well, okay, Rob, speaking about young guys that could jump, let's go with Colin Kaepernick. I mean, he just signed that massive contract. Most money ever guaranteed at $61.5 million. All right, so what do we got with Cap?
Yeah, well, let's get into that because that sounds a lot better than in actuality it actually is. So I'm glad you brought that up. This is the deal, and I am not a sports agent. I am not an attorney. None of that. But I did read into what those guys who do know what they're talking about, how they broke down this actual contract. Like you said, Jimmer, he signed a 6-year, $126 million contract with $61 million guaranteed, quote unquote. But it is really, truly not. I mean, a lot of these contracts aren't truly what they appear to be on the headlines. It is not truly $161 million guaranteed. I'm not going to sit here and take the time to break down all the reasons why, but essentially, and you can look it up yourself, but from what I read, this is a very, very San Francisco 49ers, what they call team-friendly contract.
They can cut him.
Yeah, and he's getting about $12 million up front. I mean, he definitely has enough money to go out and buy another pet tortoise. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But the fact is, comparing his numbers to some of these elite guys and his guaranteed money, there's so many different, if he does this, he gets this. If he shows up for this, or he gets this. So it's not as big as it might appear. But the bottom line is the guy has done well. He's brought him to the verge of the Super Bowl 2 straight years, NFC Championship game. He deserves to get paid. They paid him, but he could leave next year and sign a whopping contract with somebody else for much better guaranteed money that's more legit as far as what I've read online. But outside of that, how do I feel about Kaepernick in general? Well, Kaepernick is the 11th quarterback going off the board, so lower than any of the other guys that we've talked about so far. He's going at the beginning of the 8th round. I actually have him as at 7th. Cushman, Jay has him at 11, and so does Jimmer have him at 11. So I'm a little higher on him than the rest. He finished as the 11th last year, 3,200 yards, 21 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. He rushed 92 times for 524 yards, which was 5.7 yards per attempt, which was higher than any running back last year. Andre Ellington was the highest running back from a rush per attempt. He blew him out. Well, he didn't blow him out of the water. I think Andre was 5.2 or 5.5. Anyway, when he runs the ball, he runs it very well. Let's just put it there. He ran for 4 rushing touchdowns. Jim Harbaugh, for those of you who would clearly, I guess, know nothing about the NFL football, is the coach for the 49ers. He expects Harbaugh to have a real breakout year. I mean, he's quoted as saying he just has the look and feel that he's going to break out more than he already has. Is that coach speak? Abso-freaking-lutely it is. That's what coaches do, but that doesn't mean it's not true. I've watched Kaepernick for the last, couple seasons that he's played, that he's had the starting position. He definitely has it. There's optimism, I mean, the guy's got all sorts of firepower around him. He's going to have Crabtree back for a full season this coming year, which is tremendous. If you listen to our previous podcast about wide receivers, I let you guys know that out of all the attempts that Kaepernick threw in 2012, 51% of those targets went to Crabtree. So he loves the guy. And actually, this is an interesting stat. In the last 18 games with Michael Crabtree healthy and on the field in the lineup, Kaepernick averaged 20.9 fantasy points per game, which equates to number 3 quarterback numbers. And he's going to have him 100% healthy for all of 2014. So that's why I'm a little bit higher on him. They, of course, still have Vernon Davis. The guy's probably the most athletic tight end, just from an athletic ability perspective. with even Jimmy Graham and talking about those guys out there. He's got Anquan Bolden still, who's a beast. They added Stevie Johnson, which is still just another downfield threat. And of course, they have Kaepernick's legs, and that's a big part of his game besides his arm. So, San Francisco defense, we've heard in the news they've taken a bit of a hit from a legal standpoint, which is what happens when you go through an airport and you say something about bomb or weapons or whatnot. Bad things happen. But regardless, the red flag for Kaepernick is that he's on the 49ers. I mean, they're a rush-oriented team. They pound the ball with Frank Gore, even though he's 77 years old, and they conservatively go down the field and they win they typically win with defense. They're passing. They were actually second to last in passing percentages in 2013 at just about 45%. So that's the negative. But he has so many positives going into this season. It's another full season for him in this offense. He's got Crabtree back. I see Kaepernick as passing for 3,700 yards. I think he approaches 30 touchdowns. I see him rushing for 500 yards because that's what he does, and probably rushing for 4 touchdowns. So I've got him ranked as the 7th quarterback going into 2014.
Yeah, I don't not that high on Colin Kaepernick or the 49ers offense this year. I mean, yeah, they've got some good receivers. I just think they run the ball too much for this guy to break the top 10 very easily. And they have a huge stable of running backs over there right now, so it's not like if one of them goes down, he's going to get more passing attempts because of it. So I've got him at 11th. There's guys I'd rather take than Colin Kaepernick that are going in that same area. And we'll talk about them a little bit later. But Jim, what do you think of Kaepernick?
I'm right there with you. In my opinion, a top 10 quarterback's got to at least throw for 4,000 yards. And Rob, you even said it. I mean, he's not going to do that. So that's my big thing with that. I mean, like Jay said, I mean, it's a rushing offense. I mean, it's very ball control oriented, and when you have something like that, I mean, it's very tough for him to do otherwise. I think having Crabtree back is definitely going to help him. I think he'll definitely be better. But I think, Rob, like you said, his breakout year is 3,700 yards passing. Like, really? I mean, I'm pretty sure Peyton did that in the first quarter of the season. So.
Well, no, I mean, I agree. 3,700 is not tremendous. However, he's also a rushing QB, which a lot of these other guys are not. I mean, Phillip Rivers, or Andy Dalton, whatever, those guys threw for like 4,300 yards, but they don't run for shit. So I think that adds a different dynamic. Plus, you got to remember in fantasy scoring, they're going to get a point for every 10 yards that they rush versus getting a point for every 20 to 25 yards that they throw. So I think that's what makes up the difference there for me for Kaepernick. But all right, guys. Well, that wraps it up for our quarterbacks and tight ends for this podcast. On our next show, we are actually working to put together a 10 to 12 man or woman, for that matter, mock draft. Hopefully sometime next Thursday. We're going to have a good group of fantasy football degenerates such as ourselves to do a live on the air and discuss our picks as we pick them, our rationale and mentality about why we picked a guy where and what our thinking process is for doing so. So I don't know about you guys, but when I listen to podcasts, that's one of the favorite things I listen to is mock drafts and listening to why these guys do what they do. So go ahead and look out for that. We'll definitely keep you posted via Twitter for when that is going to be done. You can watch it live on YouTube and then when we're going to be releasing that. But again, we're hoping to do that this coming Thursday. In the meantime, go to redzonewarriors.com. You can watch all of our previous episodes. You can see our rankings. You can subscribe to the show via iTunes. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter. Tweet us your fantasy football questions at RedZoneWarriors. So for the Cushman, the Jimmer, I am Rob Smith. And remember, if you are taking a fantasy football season off, then you are already losing. So thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next time.
I'm drafting QBs in the first 3 rounds.